Enraged, I went to Kong Seok-ho's hideout, convinced he was behind the assassination. But he wasn't there, so I took my anger out on his henchmen. After my cleanup, Kong Seok-ho was furious and terrified by my skills. His right-hand man told him that Koo Jeong-man was behind this mess. Whatever Koo Jeong-man's plan was, Kong Seok-ho was determined not to let him succeed. Then, Heung Ju and I returned to Oh Gyeong-suk's house to investigate. There, we found a list of addresses of those who received the guns. We quickly realized all the addresses came from the mysterious website Moon Baek had mentioned. The arms dealers had planted a virus and tracking devices on that website. And then, a chilling conclusion flashed through my mind. The smugglers weren't just sending guns to random people. They were specifically targeting society's most desperate, depressed individuals like Oh Gyeong-suk, outcasts like Li Suk, and victims of injustice. It's clear someone wants to exploit these people to create chaos, turning South Korea into a powder keg ready to explode. The next night, I still saw Moon Baek at the hospital. Seeing him still staying to watch over Oh Gyeong-suk, I couldn't help but be curious, so I asked why he was helping me. Moon Baek told a heartbreaking story, saying he wanted to do some good before closing his eyes for the last time. He said he understood suffering better than anyone, because his life had been a living hell since he was a baby. He was abandoned by his mother, then fell into the hands of an organ trafficking ring. When he was 5, they took his left eye to sell, and his current eye is a transplant. At 10 years old, they sold him to human traffickers in America, where more parts of his body were taken. But then, the FBI raided, and he was rescued. A wave of pity washed over me. It was bitter to think that some people had even more miserable lives than I did. At the same time, at school, Gyujin was trying to remain calm. He was itching to kill Song-joon for all the bullying, but since he hadn't done his military service yet, he didn't know how to use a rifle. He was just enduring, waiting for his chance. But Song-joon wouldn't let go. The thug grabbed a razor blade and slashed Gyujin's back, a moment that sent him exploding into uncontrollable rage. That same night, Koo Jeong-man, wearing a mask, snuck into the hospital. He came to get revenge on me, the one who had made dozens of his subordinates eat dirt. He found me in the elevator and was about to strike. But Moon Baek intervened, stopping him just in time. The confrontation was tense, but the gangster had no choice but to retreat. After everything settled down, Moon Baek and I went our separate ways. But as soon as Moon Baek turned his back, a group of foreigners approached, and then a horrific truth was revealed. The man who had been by my side for so long was the mastermind behind all the chaos. It was Moon Baek who had supplied guns to the most desperate in society. And it wasn't just a few guns. His organization sent a whole truckload of rifles to Kim Yun-soo's gang, but the coup ruined his plan, and I proving to be a very big thorn in his side. While he was racking his brain for his next move, one of his subordinates, unable to keep his mouth shut, kept rambling on. Moon Baek, with cold, soulless eyes, walked up and shot the man dead without hesitation. The film rewinds to 20 years ago, when Moon Baek was a child in America. Gun trafficking was rampant, and he, a boy raised by gangsters, was no stranger to firearms. After finding and annihilating the gang that had taken his organs, he was approached by a weapons dealer named Jake. Jake was so impressed with a kid who could take down an entire gang that he adopted it. As a gift, the old man gave Moon Baek a glass eye to replace the one that was stolen. It was a prosthetic eye with a brilliant blue iris. That blue iris later became his nickname, Blue-Brown Iris. Jake then trained him to become a ruthless assassin and weapons dealer. Years later, as an adult, Moon Baek asked Jake for permission to start giving out free guns. His stated goal was to create chaos and legitimize gun ownership so Jake could legally sell weapons. But Moon Baek's true motive was revenge on the country that had abandoned him. Back in the present, Kong Seok-ho summoned Koo Jeong-man to his hideout. Seeing through his betrayal, the old man slapped him hard, but Koo Jeong-man swore on his life that he was still loyal. Kong Seok-ho pretended to believe him, but as soon as Koo Jeong-man was out of sight, he began plotting to eliminate him permanently. The next day at school, the bullying continued. Song-joon was still tormenting Gyujin during lunch, but Gyujin was no longer afraid. He was just waiting for the perfect moment to send his tormentor on his way. Meanwhile, Moon Baek's henchmen suggested just killing me to be done with it, but Moon Baek, the puppet master boss, wanted me to live. He was still enjoying his cat and mouse game with me. Soon after, Moon Baek arrived at a public area where Gyujin and Young Dong were eating. He planned to corner Gyujin, forcing him to use the rifle that had been sent. Young Dong, feeling guilty, apologized to Gyujin for hitting him, explaining that Song-joon had forced him to do it. While they were talking, Moon Baek's men, on his orders, ignited a brawl between rival gangs nearby. Gyujin and everyone else were shocked to see the thugs savagely beating each other. As the chaos reached its peak, Moon Baek pulled out an air gun and took down the thugs. Gyujin was utterly stunned. He now truly believed that guns were the only way to help others, and killing Song-jun would save everyone from this hell on earth. With that thought, he begged Moon Baek to teach him how to shoot. Moon Baek, having achieved exactly what he wanted, gladly agreed, even extending the lesson to Yeong Dong, who was also a victim. A while later, Moon Baek called Kong Seok-ho, secretly reporting the guns that Kim Yeon-soo had hidden. Kong Seok-ho was stunned by the news. Moon Baek told him to make a move on Koo Jeong-man first, distributing the weapons himself before Koo Jeong-man could act. While waiting for Kong Seok-ho to make his move, Moon Baek and his gang returned to their work. He used unsuspecting elderly delivery men to transport newly arrived gun shipments, ensuring the delivery men didn't know what they were carrying. Meanwhile, Gyujin had finally reached his breaking point. He packed his new rifle and a backpack full of ammunition, hugged his mother one last time before heading to school. He knew today was the day he would end it all. As Gyujin was on his way, Moon Baek met with me. At this point, I still didn't know his true colors. Moon Baek handed me a piece of paper with a list of gun recipients, including Gyujin's name and address. Knowing I was running out of time, I immediately called for backup. I also called the school, warning the principal that a student was carrying a gun on campus. In a grim final move, Moon Baek's men locked all the doors and hid the keys, trapping everyone inside a school that was about to become a war zone. Just as Gyujin was about to snap, a teacher called him into the office. And as a twist of fate, Song-jun's henchmen grabbed Gyujin's backpack and found the gun. Naturally, Gyujin panicked. He returned to being a victim, helpless against the bullying. But then, a gunshot rang out from a nearby classroom, and Song-jun and his gang fell silent in horror. It wasn't Gyujin, it was his friend, Yeong Dong. He too had received a package of guns and had now become a vengeful shooter, ready to kill everyone in the school. As the school turned into a bloody mess, Yeong Dong handed Gyujin a pistol and said it was time for justice. He reasoned that since no one, not even the teachers, had ever helped them, there was no reason to spare them either. But Gyujin hesitated. Yeong Dong didn't wait for him to decide, continuing his massacre while students and teachers ran for their lives. Just as the chaos reached its peak, Moon Baek and I arrived to evacuate the students, with dozens still trapped in the library. We quickly set up barricades and took refuge in the library, where the students cowered in fear. The fear in Song-jun's eyes was evident. He had never imagined that the children he bullied could be so brutal. Meanwhile, Yeong Dong had found the library. He offered to let the students go if they handed over Song-jun and his gang. Song-jun, in a panic, threatened the other students to keep quiet, while the teacher tried to reason with Yeong Dong. But Yeong Dong just screamed that it was too late. He had begged the teacher for help again and again, but no one cared. With that, he shot the teacher. With no other option, the other students fled, leaving Song-jun to face his fate. Just as Yeong Dong was about to kill him, I stepped in, begging him to stop. But then Gyujin arrived, gun in hand, aimed directly at Song-jun. It was the final push from Moon Baek, who had told him this was the only way to get justice. Gyujin's hand trembled. He desperately wanted to pull the trigger but feared disappointing his mother. I saw that internal struggle and pleaded with him to put the gun down, saying revenge would only lead to more suffering. Tears streamed down Gyujin's cheeks, and he slowly lowered his weapon. In the end, he couldn't do it. Gyujin and Yeong Dong were arrested, but as they were led away, Gyujin realized a bitter truth. You and Yeong Dong, the victims, were treated like criminals, while Song-jun, the bully, was considered the victim. Your mother, watching from afar, could only weep for her son's shattered life. After everything, I finally realized who the real devil was. Heung Ju and I pieced together the clues, and they all pointed to Moon Baek. But as the police prepared to act, Moon Baek vanished. I went to Moon Baek's luxurious apartment, only to find it empty, with a new package addressed to me lying in the middle of the room. Inside was a rifle, Moon Baek's final gift, and a chilling signal that our war had just begun. The aftermath of the school shooting was chaos. With tens of thousands of illegal guns flooding the streets, South Korea was no longer a safe country. Both the police and the public lived in fear, on edge. Even the underworld was shaken. Gang bosses convened an emergency meeting, but only Kong Seok-ho knew the true origin of the guns, and he kept it to himself. He had a new plan. He will hand over his weapon to me and place all the blame on Koo Jeong-man. He knows the government is looking for a scapegoat, and he intends to give them one. He arranged a meeting with me, and did exactly that, insisting that everything was the fault of Kim Yoon-soo and Koo Jeong-man. Meanwhile, at police headquarters, the police commissioner received direct orders from the president to form a joint task force, bringing together intelligence, the military, and the police. If they failed, the president was prepared to declare martial law, a move that could turn South Korea into a version of its dictatorial neighbor to the north. At the same time, Captain Ju grew increasingly frantic as he couldn't reach his daughter for days. Little did he know, His daughter had been conned by a group of real estate scammers who took advantage of the chaos of gun violence as a cover. She had lost all her savings and the pension her father had given her so she could buy a home and start her own life. Now that money was gone, leaving her in despair and guilt. Elsewhere in the city, Koo Jeong-man and Kim Yoon-soo had been quietly collecting guns from other recipients, but they were playing a waiting game, holding out for the perfect moment to strike at Kong Seok-ho. The cat-and-mouse game was at its height when Kong Seok-ho approached Koo Jeong-man, offering a truce and a chance to cooperate. Of course, it was a lie. Kong Seok-ho was working with me, and he wanted Koo Jeong-man to use Kim Yoon-soo's finger to access his phone, which contained all the information about gun trafficking. But Koo Jeong-man was no pushover either. He knew Kong Seok-ho was a slippery fox, so he and Kim Yoon-soo devised a counterplan. The next day, Koo Jeong-man and his men went to a secluded spot and pretended to dig up a grave. They knew Kong Seok-ho's men, and the police were watching. After the charade, they went to a sauna, a familiar haunt of Kong Seok-ho's gang. They were ordered to leave and bring Kim Yoon-soo's finger as soon as possible. Back at his hideout, Kong Seok-ho was waiting with a gun ready to kill Koo Jeong-man and hand him over to the police. But, to his shock, the person who appeared was not Koo Jeong-man. It was Kim Yoon-soo, whom he thought was permanently buried. Kong Seok-ho was dealt a heavy blow, but he didn't have much time to process it as a gunfight erupted immediately. Meanwhile, Koo Jeong-man and his men were at the sauna, where they systematically dealt with each member of Kong Seok-ho's gang. Then, they looted all the money and valuables from the hideout, and in an instant, Koo Jeong-man became the boss of the largest gang in Korea. He distributed the money to his subordinates, a reward for their loyalty and hard work, but his reign would not last, as the police special task force was on its way to raid the hideout. When Heung Ju and the SWAT team finally broke down the door, both Kong Seok-ho and Kim Yoon-soo were dead. But Koo Jeong-man was the victor, and now he was the king. The police were hunting him, and the final confrontation was about to begin. As the gunfight erupted, I grabbed a sniper rifle and set out to hunt down Koo Jeong-man. Koo Jeong-man managed to escape by car, but I wouldn't let him get away. I climbed onto the rooftop of a nearby building, and with a professional shot from afar, I disabled his tires. Koo Jeong-man was arrested, and I brought an end to the gang war. But with Koo Jeong-man's arrest, Moon Baek's plan fell into chaos. He had relied on the gang war to distract the police and me. His boss, Jake, was putting on the pressure. If the operation failed, his business could be exposed by the CIA and FBI. He needed to find a new way to get guns into the world. Amidst all that chaos, Captain Ju received the worst news of his life. His daughter was dead. She had taken her own life, unable to face the shame of being swindled out of her life savings. Captain Ju had given her his entire pension so she could buy a house and start over, and now it was all gone. Seeing his daughter's lifeless body, Captain Ju broke down and wept. I, caught up in the case, had no idea my mentor was enduring such immense pain. That night, I went to my old army superiors, begging for weapons and information to hunt down Moon Baek. My intelligence agents and I were now fully aware of Moon Baek's criminal past and vast organization. But he was always one step ahead. He had hired the very journalist who filmed my shootout and offered an enormous sum of money to film every new shooting that occurred. Then he hacked into all domestic internet connections, sending out a chilling message. South Korea was now his. He ended the broadcast with a final message, challenging me, stating that a gun had been sent to Captain Ju. I immediately panicked, dispatching officers to search for Moon Baek while I rushed to Captain Ju's house. But it was too late. Captain Ju had found the swindlers who had ruined his daughter's life. He was mocked by them as they saw him as a lone policeman with no backup. But their arrogance quickly vanished as Captain Ju pulled out his gun and shot one of them. In that moment, facing death, their complacency turned into utter terror. From afar, Moon Baek's journalist had recorded the entire incident, broadcasting this act of violence live to the nation. Just as Captain Ju was about to kill the last swindler, I burst in, begging my mentor to stop. My voice choked with emotion. I reminded Captain Ju that he had lost a daughter, but he had also lost a son, this very adopted son. I reminded him of his own words many years ago when he told a young Lee do not to seek revenge. Now, the man who taught me that lesson was about to break his own rule. Captain Ju, unable to disregard my words, broke down in tears. He didn't know how to seek justice for his daughter, and it was tearing him apart. Moon Baek, angered that I had convinced Captain Ju not to pull the trigger, finally revealed himself. With a sniper rifle in hand, he opened fire, unleashing a barrage of bullets upon Captain Ju and me. The ambush was brutal. I took multiple shots, and Captain Ju, shielding his foster child, took a fatal one. Seeing the fatherly figure fall, a rage surged within me, and I tried to rise to fight. but I was too severely wounded and shot down again, leaving me paralyzed and helpless as I watched Captain Ju breathe his last. Moon Baek, the architect of this tragedy, left me there bleeding, wanting me to witness the world he was creating. A world where anyone armed with a gun could dispense their own brand of justice. Then, he delivered a chilling message, vowing to send more guns, this time even for the children. From that day on, guns became a normal part of life in South Korea. People walked around with firearms, and YouTubers started making unboxing videos of guns. The country descended into chaos, with shootings occurring almost daily. The government, in its desperation, was ready to declare martial law, but even the public was divided, with one group demanding a ban on guns and another group demanding full legalization. Amidst all this, Moon Baek made his next power move. He attended a secret meeting of gang bosses and shot one dead, a chilling display of his power. He then threw a single pistol on the table and declared that he only needed one of them to run things. The rest would be killed. The terrified gang bosses scrambled for the gun, and when a new boss emerged, Moon Baek ordered his men to slaughter the rest. A week later, I finally woke up from my coma. As Moon Baek had promised, the world was completely different. With both my adoptive father and sister gone, I had nothing left but a burning desire for revenge. After arranging their funerals, I received a call from my intelligence contacts. They had discovered thousands were protesting outside Parliament. I knew this was a ticking time bomb. With the pro-gun and anti-gun factions in the same location, a bloodbath was inevitable. I rushed to the scene and was soon contacted by Moon Baek. The two of us met in a nearby building, Moon Baek surrounded by dozens of mercenaries while I, still recovering from my wounds, hobbled on crutches. Moon Baek, ever the manipulator, proposed I join forces. He pointed to our shared past. Both abandoned as children, both scarred by tragedy. Moon Baek wasn't entirely evil. He simply wanted to empower the weak and give them the means to seek their own justice. He believed that with a gun, the choice to pull the trigger was personal, but for me, there was no gray area. Moon Baek was no hero. He was just a man blinded by his own need for revenge. Believing he could not sway me, Moon Baek immediately enacted his final plan. He drove a truck full of rifles to the protest, threw open the doors and let the protesters swarm in like moths to a flame. I, seeing the chaos, rushed to stop the truck, but Moon Baek's mercenaries were waiting. Even with my injuries, I took them all down, but it was too late. The protesters, now armed and terrified by the police and military, had started a chaotic shootout. It was a brutal reality. A gun was not a symbol of hope, as Moon Baek claimed, but a symbol of fear. As the chaos reached its peak, Moon Baek appeared with a smoke grenade, facilitating the protesters' blind firing. At that very moment, Moon Baek himself was hit by a stray bullet, but he didn't flinch. He had achieved his ambition of sowing terror into the country that had cast him out, a final resolve he had dreamed of. Amidst the massacre, I saw a crying boy whose parents had just been shot and killed. I ran to him and held him tight, shielding him from the bullets flying everywhere. That heroic act was captured by one of the journalists, and when the footage aired live, public opinion began to shift. Guns weren't making them safer, they were tearing them apart. After the shooting subsided, the government held a memorial for the victims and ordered everyone to turn in their guns. Meanwhile, the journalist who had filmed me earlier was promoted for his viral videos, but his new job as a manager didn't last. On the very first day, a woman whose life was ruined by an article he wrote shot him. It seems karma is real. As for Moon Baek, he was in a coma at the hospital, but I saved him. I wanted to get to the bottom of the shady organization Moon Baek worked for, but an assassin was sent by Moon Baek's boss, Jake, to finish him off. This scene wasn't shown, so his fate remains a mystery. Finally, Oh Gyeong-suk, who was shot and in a coma, woke up. And I, finally having a family, adopted the boy I saved, finding a glimmer of hope in a world ravaged by violence. This is the end of my story. Be sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching till the end, and see you next time.